Madam President.
Senator from North Dakota.
Madam President, I ask that the quorum call be suspended.
The Senate's not in a quorum call.
All right, then I'd ask for UC that I'd be allowed to engage in a colloquy with my colleagues.
Without objection.
Very good. Thank you, Madam President. I rise today to speak about a very important issue, not only for my home state, but for our country. And that's the Mexico-Canada Agreement, the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, also referred to as the USMCA. And of course, this is the agreement that would replace NAFTA. It will increase exports, expand consumer choice, raise wages, and boost innovation, not just for our country, but also for two of our strongest trading partners, Canada and Mexico as well. In the United States, the U.S. International Trade Commission's analysis found that the USMCA will raise GDP by nearly $63 billion and create more than 176,000 jobs. Implementation of this agreement will also benefit my state, as it will secure and expand market access for our ag producers, and that's true for all of our ag-producing states across the country. It will help grow our manufacturing base as well for our manufacturing state, like my good friend and colleague from Ohio, who's just joined us. And it will provide important support and help for the technology sector and really the energy sector. All of our different industry sectors stand to benefit from this agreement. Access to foreign markets is critical for American agriculture and for our producers who have maintained an ag trade surplus for more than 50 years. We produce far more than we can consume in this country, and we need access to markets. Canada, Mexico, and beyond. Matter of fact, my state, North Dakota, is the 9th largest ag producer of ag goods, exporting and shipping $4.5 billion worth of ag products around the globe, just for example in 2017. Again, farmers and ranchers depend on free and fair trade in order to sell the highest quality, lowest cost food supply, not just in our country, but in the world. We produce the highest quality, lowest cost food supply, benefits every single American, every single day, and benefits many other people around the globe if we're able to export to these other countries. According to the International Trade Commission, when fully implemented, the USMCA will increase U.S. ag and food exports to Canada and Mexico by $2.2 billion. This agreement secures existing market access, makes ag trade fairer, increases access to the Canadian market, and supports innovation in agriculture, which is why it is critical that Congress consider and pass this agreement as soon as possible. Passage of the USMCA will help secure market access in Canada for U.S. farmers and ranchers, as the agreement maintains all existing zero-tariff provisions on ag products. Canada and Mexico are crucial markets for U.S. agriculture, and the USMCA gives our producers the certainty that these markets will continue to remain open for business. I've got more, but I've got some of my colleagues here, and so I'm going to turn to them, starting with my colleague from Indiana, somebody who's been active in business for many years, built a business from scratch, from nothing to, I believe, more than 1,000 employees. Certainly somebody that understands the importance of business and understands the importance of markets and accessing those markets and trade and export. So I would turn at this point to the good senator from Indiana for some of his thoughts on this important issue.
Thank you, Senator Hoeven. It is true, I'm a Main Street entrepreneur, been involved in business my entire life, including the farm markets. Started a turkey farm back in 1979 from scratch, was involved in it for 32 years, sold my share of it to my partner's kids and grandkids. My wife's had a business in downtown Jasper, my hometown, for years. Been an entrepreneur, dealt with how hard the marketplace is to exist even when things are going well. Here I stand to make the point that USMCA on behalf of Hoosier farmers, businesses, to express my strong opinion that we need to get this across the finish line. This agreement is vital to secure hard-fought market access for American agriculture at a time when agriculture could never have more challenges, from chronically low prices, increasing concentration among farmer suppliers with big corporations. This is one piece of uncertainty we need to eliminate. It is, in stressing the importance of the USMCA, despite the fact that NAFTA had faults, it was quite successful in securing markets for farmers. This is better. It provides stronger access to Canadian markets for U.S. milk, wheat, poultry, and egg products. It ensures that Hoosier wine and spirit makers are treated fairly on Canadian shelves. And it secures the Mexican market for Indiana pork, cheese, and grain. The USMCA improves on NAFTA in other areas of the economy as well. It adds modern rules for digital trade and stronger protections for American intellectual property. And we know how important that is with what we've seen dealing with the Chinese. It contains new rules of origin that ensure more manufacturing is conducted in North America and has brand new rules to bring more of that production back to the U.S. When President Trump ran for office, he ran on a few simple things. Negotiating for NAFTA improvement was one of his core promises to the American public. At the time, Congress had two requests: follow the guidelines from the Trade Promotion Authority and move quickly to minimize uncertainty. President Trump upheld his end of the bargain. He has delivered an agreement that is better than the original NAFTA in nearly every respect. And this week, Congress is ready to vote, and yet we can't. Why? Because House Democrats will not bring it to the floor. Don't believe me? Look at this letter dated July 8th from several House Democrats. They say in plain English, do not send this agreement to the Congress. Do not send this agreement to the Congress. Madam President, I ask for unanimous consent for this letter to be entered into the record.
Without objection.
This is an outrage. We are ready. Today you will hear from senators who support this deal. Here in the Senate, we have more than enough votes to pass the USMCA. There is no reason to wait. The Democrats have known the contents of this deal for over 2 years. They knew the provisions offered by the U.S. and saw the text as it developed. Once the final text was released, the Democrats were stumped. They couldn't figure out how to oppose the USMCA. First, they argued that Mexico needed to pass its labor reforms. Mexico did so in April. Then they moved the goalposts, arguing that labor and environmental provisions in the deal were not strong enough. Even though they are substantially stronger than NAFTA and the agreement that some of them even supported, they still want to move the goalposts. In fact, the USMCA is the first ever trade agreement to contain provisions requiring a minimum wage for Mexican auto workers. The Democrats still aren't happy, this time asking for enforcement. In response, the Mexican president issued assurances that Mexico would enforce the new labor law the Democrats had demanded. But Nancy Pelosi is keeping those goalposts moving. The fact of the matter is that the Democrats are blocking USMCA because they do not want to give President Trump a win. The worst of all reasons, and what makes this place so objectionable to so many people. In the meantime, NAFTA remains the law of the land. While they play their political games, American workers are still competing under the old NAFTA rules. It is time for Nancy Pelosi to end these political games. We need to pass the USMCA. In closing, I'd simply remind my colleagues that this trade debate is unlike any other this chamber has ever made. The USMCA is the first ever renegotiation of a major trade agreement. We are not talking about whether we should have an agreement with our Mexican and Canadian partners, because we already do. Instead, this debate is about the future of that relationship. Do the American people want the rules in the original NAFTA, or do they want the modern protections included in the USMCA? The USMCA is a substantially better agreement than NAFTA, and the American economy, Hoosiers, need these new rules so that we can move forward into the 21st century with a stronger American economy and North American region. It's time to pass the USMCA now. I yield my time.
I'd like to thank the major ag, but I know manufacturing and many other areas, the USMCA, very important to your state of Indiana. I thank state that's certainly an ag powerhouse, and ask for his comments on the importance of the USMCA.
First of all, I thank Senator Hoeven for leading this discussion, a very important discussion, because American farmers, workers, and businesses stand to benefit greatly from the new United States-Mexico-Canada agreement. This successor agreement to NAFTA will allow for more market access for agriculture, new commitments in critical areas such as customs, digital trade, intellectual property, labor, environment, currency, and the lowering of non-tariff barriers, all translating into higher wages, greater productivity, and more jobs. As a family farmer, I can say without a doubt that trade with Canada and Mexico are critical to the prosperity of my state of Iowa, the Midwest, and for that matter, all of rural America. In 2019, the Business Roundtable study found that the trade with Mexico and Canada supported 12 million U.S. jobs. The same study found that 130,000 Iowa jobs were supported by trade with Canada and Mexico in 2017, and $6.6 billion in Iowa goods and services were exported to Canada and Mexico. According to the National Association of Manufacturers, Canada and Mexico purchased nearly half of Iowa's total global manufacturing exports. President Trump and Ambassador Lighthizer delivered a solid deal to enhance this critical relationship with our good neighbors. Now, Congress must act to implement the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. As Ambassador Lighthizer said earlier this year, doing so will not only help the economy of the three countries, but it will enhance the credibility of America's global trade agenda. That's more important than ever, as talks between the United States and China are back on track. I'm looking forward to hearing concrete suggestions from House Democrats sometime soon. I'm glad Speaker Pelosi has formed working groups to work with Ambassador Lighthizer to address Democrat concerns, and that these meetings are underway. About a month ago, I met for a half hour with Speaker Pelosi, and I can assure you that she wants to get to yes, but she has a lot of new members, as we know in the House of Representatives. The largest number of new members in that body since 1974, and there's a lot that new members have to learn. And as leader of and Speaker of the House of Representatives, she's got to make sure that those new members are comfortable with it. And I'm sure that she wants to get there. Any additions to the USMCA that might come as a result of these negotiations that can improve the outcome of American workers, I'm happy to consider. It's important to remember that the USMCA is better than NAFTA by nearly every standard, including labor and environment. So I hope discussions between House Democrats and Ambassador Lighthizer is an exercise in getting to the yes that I feel that Speaker Pelosi wants to get to. One particular area where everyone can agree is that enforcement across the board is a key compromise that must be hammered out. Factors outside of farmers' hands, such as an oversupply of grain in the global market, an unusually wet spring across the Midwest, and natural disasters like flooding, have all contributed to increased uncertainty and less profitability for farmers and leading to anxiety among those same farmers. Passing the USMCA will help alleviate some of that uncertainty and anxiety for the years ahead by providing stable export market for American corn, soybeans, pork, and dairy, to name just a few examples of the benefits not only to farming, but the rest of the agenda for manufacturing and services. I yield the floor.
I'd like to thank the senator from Iowa, not only for all his work on behalf of agriculture, but also for his leadership on the Finance Committee, which is so important to advancing the USMCA. So I thank you. And we'll go from the Midwest now to the South. This is an agreement that benefits all regions of the country. And so I now turn to the good senator from the great state of Arkansas.
Well, thank you so much. And I want to thank my colleague, Senator Hoeven, for organizing this very important event. I think you sense a theme building here. Many of my colleagues have spoken about the economic benefits USMCA holds for their specific states, and I'd like to add Arkansas to the list. According to the Arkansas World Trade Center, which, by the way, does an excellent job promoting trade in my state and growing opportunities for our exporters, Canada and Mexico are Arkansas's top trading partners by far. Arkansas goods and services are exported to 181 countries, but Canada and Mexico combined for over 1/3 of our exports in 2017. Our exports to these two countries added $2.1 billion to Arkansas's economy that year. Nearly 69,000 jobs in my state are dependent on trade with Canada, and another 41,000 jobs are affected by trade with Mexico. Arkansas exports about $1.3 billion in goods to Canada and another $182 million in services. I could go on, but we've already covered a lot of statistics here today. It's important to remember that there are real people behind this data. They're the workers in the paper mills in South Arkansas, the employees of the steel mills in Northwest Arkansas, the family partners producing rice in the Delta, the line workers at the poultry processing plants in Northwest Arkansas. These Arkansans and many more work in the industries that produce our top exports to Mexico and Canada. For them and countless others, the announcement that a trade agreement has been reached with Canada and Mexico was very welcome and promising news. Arkansas farmers, business leaders, and workers understand how vital it is to have free but also fair trade, particularly with our neighbors to the north and the south. It helps create the sense of certainty that has been sorely missing for our manufacturers, small businesses, and the agriculture industry. For our agriculture community, it is particularly crucial that we push this agreement across the finish line. Our farmers face a very tenuous situation right now. Commodity prices are well below the cost of production. Farm incomes in 2018 dropped sharply again for the 5th consecutive year. Total farm debt has risen to levels not seen since the early 1980s. A rainy fall and spring have hampered planting season, and in the case of Arkansas, produced one of the worst floods in the state's history. All of this combined has placed Arkansas rural communities in dire conditions. Far too many family farms are barely hanging on, and sadly, many more are filing for bankruptcy. Arkansas has a diverse economy ranging from aerospace and defense to steel production to the world's largest retailer, but agriculture is by far our largest industry. It adds around $16 billion to our economy every year and accounts for approximately 1 in every 6 jobs in Arkansas. In my discussions with farmers on how we can help, the same mantra is often repeated. They prefer trade over aid. While they appreciate the President's efforts to ease the pain during these trade standoffs, what they really need are more markets in which to sell their products. They understand that increased trade is the way forward to create a better long-term outlook for their operations. Our neighbors to the north and south are our natural allies and trading partners. The President and his team worked hard to get Canada and Mexico to the negotiating table to formalize a more mutually beneficial agreement. That hard work has paid off in the form of the USMCA. Now, Congress has a responsibility to see it through to the end. Fair trade agreements have become increasingly important to Arkansas's economy over the last half-century. As the world becomes more interconnected, access to global markets is necessary not just for the large corporations that call Arkansas home, but also for small and medium-sized businesses that are looking to expand their operations and their footprints. With a level playing field, Arkansas's agriculture, manufacturing, and small businesses can compete with anyone around the globe. Let's help them take a giant step closer to that by swiftly approving USMCA. Thank you, Senator Hoeven.
I'd like to thank the senator from Arkansas for his words and also for his leadership in agriculture. And now turn to the senator from Ohio, who I think is going to touch on some of the aspects that are beneficial for the manufacturing sector. Senator from Ohio.
Great. Thank you to my colleague from North Dakota farmers and manufacturers, because he's got a lot of manufacturing in his state as well. Have never had a better friend, and that's why he's so strongly supportive of this agreement, because it makes a big difference. My colleague from Arkansas just talked about the fact that in Arkansas, their 2 largest trading partners are Canada and Mexico. Same with Ohio. China is actually kind of a distant third, so these 2 countries are critical for our exports, and that's why this agreement is so important. I'm a former trade lawyer. I also was the U.S. Trade Representative under George W. Bush, and now I'm on the Finance Committee, which is a committee that handles these trade issues. And I got to tell you, I think having a balanced and healthy trade relationship is really important. We have to stand up for our country, and we need to enforce these agreements that we have. But we also need to expand the exports, because that's what creates jobs. By the way, better paying jobs. They pay about 16% more on average, better benefits. So that's why we need to be sure that we have agreements like this one. We've got about 5% of the world's population and about 25% of the world's economy. We need to sell our stuff overseas. It gives us access to the 95% of the consumers who live outside of our borders. Mexico and Canada, as I said, are our biggest trading partners. 39% of our exports go to Canada alone. That's twice the national average. All in all, Mexico and Canada now supports more than 12 million jobs nationally. That's according to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. 12 million jobs. We all know the existing agreement, this NAFTA agreement, North American Free Trade Agreement, has to be updated. It's now 25 years old, and it looks like it. It doesn't have a lot of things you would expect in any modern agreement, like how about taking care of the digital economy? So much of our economy now is over the internet, and yet there's nothing in this agreement that deals with that part of our economy. It's more than just a name change. It does include a lot of different aspects that we've put in more modern agreements that don't have in the NAFTA agreement. Another one is labor and environmental standards. Not only are the standards stronger, but they're enforceable under this new agreement. They are not enforceable under NAFTA. Auto jobs left the United States of America over the last 25 years. And one reason that this agreement is necessary is that the USMCA shifts more auto production back to the United States. My colleague from North Dakota talked about the manufacturing side. This is going to get United States automobile assembly lines humming again. And why? Because car parts and cars, if you want to get the better tariff treatment under the USMCA, they have to have higher content from North America. That means from us. So under NAFTA, that requirement was 62.5%. Under USMCA, it's 75%. By the way, also there's a new provision there that says 70% of the steel that's used in these automobiles has to be North American steel. So both of these things helps to ensure we're going to have more manufacturing jobs in Ohio and around the country. American farmers, we've heard earlier, are going to gain access to new markets in Canada and Mexico. That's why Ohio farm groups are for this. That's why, by the way, nearly 1,000 farm groups from around the country now, I didn't know there were 1,000 farm groups, have come out to support this agreement. Small businesses in Ohio and around the country whose bottom line relies on these internet sales, internet commerce is going to have much more access to Canada and Mexico thanks to these new digital economy provisions. So kind of helps across the board. By the way, these stronger labor standards in Mexico we talked about are going to help level the playing field in terms of labor because labor costs are less in Mexico, right? But it goes even further than that. It actually requires that 40 to 45% of a USMCA vehicle made in Mexico or anywhere in North America must be produced by workers making at least $16 an hour. This is kind of revolutionary. It's different kind of thinking in a trade agreement. Frankly, it's something that you would expect from a Democrat administration to put in an agreement, but it's in there, and it's going to help auto workers here in this country. Because of all these changes I've discussed, by the way, many of which, like the higher minimum wage or like the higher domestic content, have been advocated by Democrats in the past. That's been their approach to these trade agreements, not Republicans so much. But because of these provisions being so good for workers, I must tell you I'm surprised, even amazed, to see so many of my Democratic colleagues not stand up to support this agreement because it has all these things that they said that they have wanted over the years, and they certainly don't like NAFTA. Many of them have campaigned against NAFTA for the past 25 years. And in a way, if you vote against USMCA, you know what you're stuck with, NAFTA. So in a way, you're voting for NAFTA if you vote against USMCA. That's the alternative here. It's a binary choice, as they say. It's either you're for this new agreement that's an improvement, or you go back to the status quo, which is NAFTA. So it'll be interesting to see, but my hope is that the media and others, outside groups, will hold people accountable to say, why would you be against an agreement that's better, even if it's not perfect from your point of view? By the way, no trade agreement is absolutely perfect. Every one of us would negotiate something slightly different. It's a question of trying to make sure you don't make the agreement, which is not perfect, the enemy of the good. And the good is to go to this new agreement. There's an outside independent study done by the International Trade Commission showing that 176,000 new jobs will be added to the U.S. economy just from this agreement alone. So this is better. So the bottom line, do we continue under the outdated NAFTA or do we adopt these new USMCA standards that will allow us to compete better in the global 21st century economy? A vote against USMCA, again, is a vote for the status quo, without enforceable labor environmental standards, with a non-existent digital economy provision, and with outdated rules of origin that allow more automobiles and auto parts to be manufactured overseas instead of here in America. USMCA addresses and solves all those problems. I put together a little handy chart here to talk about some of these specific provisions. USMCA creates 176,000 new jobs. NAFTA? None. Enforceable labor environmental standards. USMCA? Yes, check mark. Enforceable. Enforceable under NAFTA? No. Rules for the internet economy, new rules, again, to help small businesses, internet economy, check mark. NAFTA, no. 70% of the steel in vehicles have to be made in North America. That's a new provision, not in any other trade agreement, by the way. Yes on USMCA, no on NAFTA. Finally, 40 to 45% of the vehicles must be made by workers earning at least $16 an hour. NAFTA, yes. No. NAFTA, no. USMCA, yes. So, it's pretty clear to me, if you actually are honest about this, and you look at it objectively, and you say, there's two opportunities, which way would you go? So I hope my colleagues on the other side of the aisle take a look at this and apply logic and say, it might not be perfect, I might have wanted a little more here or there, but be sure that you're supporting what works for your workers. If we can get this agreement passed, the President will sign it. It will make a difference for employees, for farmers, workers, service providers in my home state of Ohio and around the country.
I want to thank the senator from Ohio, and I introduced him as the senator from Ohio because that's what he is right now, but I could have also said that he's a former USTR, U.S. Trade Ambassador, so I guess I could have said Ambassador Portman, and he was also the director of the Office of Management and Budget. So when he gets up and talks about the comparison of USMCA versus NAFTA, he certainly knows what he's talking about. And I appreciate you being here and the compelling case that you make based on many years of work and truly understanding these trade agreements and being part of developing them. So again, my thanks to the good senator from Ohio. Appreciate it very much. And now I'm going to turn to somebody who appreciates the farmer the way I do, and that's the junior senator from Iowa.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And Madam President, thank you as well to the senior senator of North Dakota. Thank you so much for your great work in pulling us all together. A number of us here on the floor really appreciate the agricultural sector, and we heard from my senior senator just a bit ago. But why am I so enthused about the USMCA? It's because in the great state of Iowa, 1 out of every 5 jobs is tied to trade. Over 87,000 farms make Iowa our nation's top egg, pork, corn, soybean, and ethanol producer. And with Canada and Mexico being 2 of our biggest trading partners, the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or what we've been talking about here, the USMCA, is a huge deal for the state of Iowa. Last year alone, my home state of Iowa exported $6.6 billion worth of products to just Canada and Mexico. That's more than we exported to our next 27 top export markets all combined. 27 combined, and it still wasn't greater than what we send to Mexico and Canada. This deal will allow those numbers to grow exponentially by creating new export opportunities for our dairy industry, greater access for our egg producers, and reducing non-tariff trade barriers that previously hampered our exporting abilities. So folks, it is critical that we get the USMCA across the finish line, but not just for the sake of getting a tremendous win for our agriculture community, but finalizing a deal that will impact the livelihoods of our hardworking Iowans and all Americans across the country. 95% of the world's population lives outside of the United States of America, which makes our exports all that more important. Having the USMCA in place means certainty. Certainty in a time where prices have been low and markets have been eroded from other trade negotiations. This trade deal preserves our duty-free access to Mexican and Canadian markets, which many of our ag producers and manufacturers benefit from. I've heard from countless equipment dealers and processors all the way down to the farmers growing the crops and raising our hogs. Ratifying this agreement will be a shot of positive energy into their businesses, their homes, and to folks all across rural America. Folks, when it comes to trade with our neighbors to the north and the south, it's simple. We need the USMCA passed through Congress as soon as possible. It's already been ratified by Mexico, folks. They're done. The deal's done with Mexico. And it looks like Canada is set to follow suit. The USMCA was signed on November 30th of 2018. That's right, 2018. That's 228 days ago. 228 days. I'd say it's about time that Speaker Pelosi and our friends in the House signal their full support for this agreement. So folks, it's time to get moving. We have got to get this deal done. We've got to get it across the finish line. Iowa's farmers, manufacturers, and small businesses are counting on us to get this done. And with that, again, I'd like to say, go USMCA. Thank you to the senior senator from North Dakota for gathering us together. I think this is a really important topic for all of us to focus on. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the senator from Iowa and turn to somebody who's been working very hard for though he's still very young, he's been working very hard for agriculture for a very long time, and that's the senator from Kansas who also happens to be our Ag Committee chairman. Senator?
Thank you, Senator Hoeven. Thanking you for getting this together, a colloquy with everybody that is concerned about this. This is what we do on the Agriculture Committee, working in a bipartisan way when we see an opportunity, and certainly we ought to seize this opportunity. Thank you for leading this. You are an outstanding champion on behalf of agriculture, and you're always riding in the posse, which I truly appreciate. I also want to thank Senator Brown from Indiana, a new and valued member of the Ag Committee, and pointing out some of the obstacles that we face. Unfortunately, they tend to be on a partisan basis. And extraneous things that need to be talked about. I know Senator Portman just brought that out with his chart. But thank you, sir, for that participation. Senator Grassley, who is a very valued member of the Ag Committee, chairman of the Finance Committee, and obviously that's the Committee of Jurisdiction, especially pointing out, as Senator Ernst has pointed out, the value of agriculture to Iowa, and for that matter, all over the country. Senator Bozeman, who talked about Arkansas and who is a valued member of the committee as well, next to the chair in terms of seniority. Senator Portman, who has been pointed out, is the former trade rep that we had in the past. With the chart, he simply pointed out in detail why this new agreement is far superior to NAFTA, and that we are working, as Senator Grassley pointed out, in working groups in the House with our lead negotiator, and I hope that works out. I certainly hope it works out. Senator Ernst has been she's an outstanding champion for farmers in Iowa, and for that matter, all around the country on the committee as well, and with compassion, and also pointing out the need for certainty. Now, since NAFTA was signed into law, the result has been that Canada and Mexico have been two of our strongest trading partners. I worked on NAFTA back in the day when I was in the House and served as ranking member, and the Honorable Kika de la Garza of Texas was the chairman. We went all over the country working on NAFTA. The result was, with that agreement, and every state can say the same thing, and I think pretty much that's already been brought up, but we're talking about 110,000 jobs in Kansas, 110,000. Those jobs are across all sectors of agriculture now, and many are tied to agriculture and are the entire agriculture value chain. NAFTA secured greater market access for our farmers, our ranchers, our growers, everybody in between, and for our producers. Today, over a quarter of our country's agriculture exports are destined for Canada and or Mexico. And as with every trade agreement, there is always room for improvements. It has been pointed out by all of my colleagues that the United States-Canada-Mexico agreement, the acronym for that is USMCA, USMCA. I did suggest that could also stand for the United States Marine Corps always, but that is the acronym that we're using. It has modernized the trade pact we have benefited for over 20 years. The U.S. agriculture industry desperately needs this trade agreement now to offer greater certainty and predictability regarding demand in the marketplace. Certainty and predictability. That's what we promised in the Farm Bill, and we passed the Farm Bill in this body with 87 votes. That's a record vote, based on the premise that the most important thing we do is provide certainty and predictability for our farmers and ranchers and growers. As chairman of the Senate Ag Committee, I have heard directly, personally, as all of my colleagues have, from producers in the broader agriculture industry regarding our challenging farm economy. Every day, our farmers, ranchers, growers experiencing incredible challenges, including weather variability, and that's putting it mildly. I do not know what we've done to Mother Nature for her to act in this fashion. In Kansas, the wheat harvest is a month late, and farmers still can't get in the field up in the northwest part. But amazingly, the yield is pretty good. The protein is staying about the same, and we have seen a little bit of price recovery. Need a lot more. The uncertainty regarding U.S. trade policy has led some of our most important trading partners to turn to our competitors. That's the ugly truth of it. At a time when the U.S. agriculture industry is facing new trade retaliation threats, on top of the challenging agriculture economy, we must offer greater certainty and predictability for the farmers and ranchers across the country. I cannot emphasize enough how serious this is. This is the fourth or fifth year that we have experienced this situation. Some farmers, ranchers produce, not all, but some are in a desperate situation. The passage of USMCA would be, will be, should be a pivotal step toward restoring the United States as a reliable supplier, not to mention tangible benefits. I urge my colleagues in the House, more especially in the House, to get together with Ambassador Lighthizer and work out these concerns that have been talked about, especially by Senator Grassley, and to give fair and swift consideration to this new trade agreement. We must expand critical market access and create new trade opportunities for United States agriculture. Again, Senator Hoeven, thank you so much for your leadership and for sponsoring this colloquy.
I'd like to thank the senator from Kansas and our Ag Committee chairman. At this point, I would ask UC for up to an additional 3 minutes of time to allow the senator from Colorado to make a few remarks, and then we would turn to the senator from Vermont for his comments.
Without objection.
All right. Then at this point, I would turn to the senator from Colorado for his remarks on USMCA.
Thank you to my colleague from North Dakota, Madam President, and to our colleague from Vermont for the accommodation of this extra time. Look, USMCA is incredibly important to the state of Colorado. Colorado is a pro-trade state. We have about 750,000 trade-related jobs in Colorado. Of that 750,000 jobs, about 250,000, almost 250,000 of those jobs are related to trade with Mexico and Canada. Nearly 250,000 of Colorado's workers are there because of trade with Canada and Mexico. It's a nearly $5 billion share of our economy. That's the total number of goods and services and exports to Canada and Mexico. And that was just a couple of years ago. So that number has obviously increased in value. Of the potatoes that Mexico imports from the United States, nearly half of the potatoes that Mexico gets come from Colorado. If you look at beverages, 97% of the beverages that Mexico imports come from Colorado. If you look at crowns, closures, seals, 96% of those items exported or imported by Mexico come from Colorado. If you look at miscellaneous leather products, if you look at the hides and other products that Mexico imports, 87% of them come from Colorado. We know that NAFTA has created thousands of jobs in Colorado. We know it's added thousands of dollars to people's income. And we know that USMCA is a better, stronger opportunity for us to gain even more jobs, more income, more opportunity for the people of Colorado. And so I thank Senator Hoeven for bringing people together on the floor to talk about the importance of free trade and particularly the passage of USMCA. And I hope that our colleagues in the House will hear this call to a brighter economic future, more trade opportunities, greater U.S. leadership by moving with USMCA, adopting it, putting it forward so that the Senate can act on it, and getting this off and into this agreement into law so that we can actually once again start rebuilding opportunities with trade. So I'm strongly supportive of this effort. It's good for Colorado, it's good for this country, and I thank both my colleague from North Dakota and my colleague from Vermont.
I'd like to thank the senator from Colorado. Again, the message is clear. We need to pass USMCA, and we urge all of our colleagues, not only in this chamber, but in the House, to do that and get this done for our country across all of our sectors of our economy.
Madam President, a number of my colleagues were down here just a few moments ago talking about trade and the impact of trade on agriculture. I've been down here a lot on the floor to talk about the ag economy in recent weeks, and if you look at our overall economy as a whole, it's thriving. But our nation's farmers and ranchers are still having a tough time thanks to years of commodity and livestock prices that are below production cost because of protracted trade disputes and now on top of that, natural disasters. Madam President, one of the most important things that we can do to help our agricultural economy is to negotiate favorable trade agreements for U.S. producers. Our nation's farmers and ranchers depend on trade. In my home state of South Dakota, we export a substantial portion of the agricultural products that we produce. Right now, though, farmers and ranchers are facing a lot of uncertainty when it comes to trade. There are a number of outstanding trade agreements, and farmers and ranchers are unsure what the rules of the road are going to look like in the future, which is why I've urged the administration to wrap up negotiations on the various trade deals under consideration as swiftly as possible. I strongly support the administration's goal of strengthening market access for our nation's farmers and ranchers, and we've made real progress in negotiations. Now it's time to push for a conclusion to these deals and to give our nation's agricultural producers certainty about what international markets are going to look like. There's one deal, however, Mr. President, that we don't need to wait for, and that is the United States-Mexico-Canada Free Trade Agreement. Negotiations on this trade agreement are finished. Mexico has already passed the agreement, and Canada is just waiting for the United States to act. All we need is for Speaker Pelosi to indicate her willingness to take up this deal, and the President will formally submit the agreement to Congress for approval. Mr. President, the United States-Mexico-Canada Free Trade Agreement is a big win for our nation's farmers and ranchers. Canada and Mexico are the #1 and #2 export markets for American food and agricultural products. The United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement will preserve and expand farmers' access to these critical markets and give farmers certainty about what these markets will look like long term. I'm particularly pleased with the improvements the agreement makes for U.S. dairy producers. Dairy is an important and rapidly growing industry in South Dakota. Drive the I-29 corridor north of Brookings and you can see firsthand what massive dairy expansion we've experienced in South Dakota over the past few years. The U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement will preserve U.S. dairy farmers' role as a key dairy supplier to Mexico, and it will substantially expand market access in Canada where U.S. dairy sales have been restricted. The U.S. International Trade Commission estimates that the agreement will boost U.S. dairy exports by more than $277 million. The agreement will also expand market access for U.S. poultry and egg producers, and it will make it easier for U.S. producers to export wheat to Canada. Mr. President, I've spent my time today talking about the agricultural industry, but of course this agreement goes much further. The United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement will benefit virtually every sector of our economy, from manufacturing to digital services to the automotive industry. It will create 176,000 new jobs, grow our economy, and raise wages for workers. Mr. President, it's time to pass this agreement and to realize its economic benefits. Senate Republicans are ready. We're ready to approve this agreement once the White House submits it to Congress. We're just waiting for Democrat leaders in the House to indicate their willingness to take up the deal. It's time for them to do so. Democrats' concerns have been more than addressed throughout the negotiation process. The final trade agreement is perhaps the most worker-friendly trade agreement the United States has ever considered. And it's a big improvement on the North American Free Trade Agreement, the agreement under which we're currently operating on the issues over which Democrats have expressed concern. Mr. President, if they're serious about making progress on these issues and are not just trying to sink the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement with specious objections, Democrats should give the President the go-ahead and take up and pass this agreement in the near future. Mr. President, I yield the floor.